Many people, when one talks about the Sugihara visa, think that that was the beginning and the end of everything. It wasn't. It was a part, a very essential, very important part. Very few things in history altogether are done by one man on one spot at one time. There are generally traces of different ways in life where things connect in totally unexpected ways.
During the Second World War, thousands of Jewish refugees could escape the Holocaust in Europe through Japan. The visas issued by Chiune Sugihara, Japanese vice consul in Kaunas, are known as visas for life. This is a story about the named and unnamed heroes who made this path possible by forming a chain of courage and goodwill.
My name is Beryl Shore. I was born in Krakow, Poland, on the 5th of November, 1927. In the morning, I used to get up. There was already the smell of coffee coming from the kitchen. I had my breakfast, I dressed, went to school, came back. Everybody knew there will be a war. There was no doubt about it. Though, shall we say, at least during the last 2 weeks, everybody was quite convinced there'll be a war. The question was, how long will it last? Father went upstairs and the mother made a little case for me with the essential clothing and so on, and which was very clever. My father gave my brother-in-law my birth certificate so that they didn't take just a strange child with them. He could prove who I was. And so I left with my sister and brother. That was the beginning of the trip. The journey at first was reasonably fast, bus on a road. But very soon, on the 3rd, 4th, 5th day of the war, the streets, the roads became filled with people trying to escape. I remember until this day a scene where I looked out the window and I saw heads. In the bus you sit quite high. I saw heads of people, a sea of people moving, carrying the bus along, because the bus was along at about the same speed. Everything on the road, civilians and here and there, army people, and all sorts of vehicles, bicycles, whoever had a motorcycle, horses, carts, and lots of people walking.
Lietuva 39 metais tai buvo tas kraštas, kuri vienintelė buvo išeitis įsigelbėti ir Lenkam, ir Žydam, ir kitų tautybių.
We stayed in Vilnius for almost a year, I think. Well, first of all, it was the Vilnius of the Russians, then the Lithuanians came in. Wintertime, the school was closed when the temperature was less than 21 degrees, minus 21. So what did we do? Instead of going to school, went down to the river to ice skate. So altogether, I have good memories from Vilnius.
In 1939, the diplomatic institutions of Lithuania were located in its temporary capital, Kaunas. The Polish refugees needed to obtain transit visas in order to enter Lithuania. The consulate of the Republic of Lithuania, which operated in 1939 in Vilnius, then part of Poland, helped refugees to reach Kaunas. Its consul was Dr. Antanas Trimikas.
Bėgimas nesustojo. Susidarydavo eilės nuo antro aukšto Žoržo viešbučio iki toks buvo univermagas, dabar nežinau, kas ten yra. Nuo šito balkono per visą 2 aukštus ir per visą gatvę pro Jagelono iki tų namų stovėdavo. Čia suplaukė nepaprastai daug iš Lenkijos žmonių. Čia visi iš Lodzės, fabrikantai, Vroclavės, kitų miestų, iš pačios Varšuvos. Visi turtuoliai plaukia į Lietuvą. Visiems buvo duodamos tos tranzito vizos į Kauną, kad jie galėtų paskui Kaune, kadangi veikia įvairių valstybių pasiuntinybės, toliau jau įsiskirstyti, kur nori.
We arrived to Kaunas and it was a city of everything. It was a little Paris, beautiful little city. You could get everything. Everything was normal. And my brother-in-law's brother in Vilno had some friends in Kaunas, and they took us out for dinner. It was a kosher restaurant, and the waiter brought a whole loaf of white bread, cut. He had to bring 2 more loaves of bread. As a boy at that time of 13, 14, ate perhaps a whole loaf like this, including 2 or 3 plates of all sorts of meats and so on. Everybody was afraid that I'll burst after that.
Ir mano tėvų žodžiai buvo, kad nebuvo nei vieno lietuvio, kuris atsisakydavo padėti. Visi dalinosi kuo tik galėjo. Ir tai buvo per visą tą laikotarpį, kurie gyveno.
So the first thing, we need a passport. He found out that the British Charge d'Affaires in Kaunas issued certificates certifying that the holder of the certificate was a Polish citizen. So the first thing he said, it's better than nothing. And so he obtained those certificates for the whole family. English document by the British Charge d'Affaires in Kaunas was issued on behalf of the Polish government in exile in London. And we were all very, very doubtful as to whether consulates will accept it as a passport. In our particular case, we had no problem with that document. And in the whole story of Sugihara, the Charge d'Affaires of the British consulate in Kaunas should have, I think, received a bit more praise than he did. Because without that, you couldn't get the visa afterwards.
In 1940, Sir Thomas Preston provided the Jews with around 1,200 legal travel certificates that helped them to escape the Holocaust through Japan or Sweden. He also issued illegal Palestine certificates for the Jews to escape through Istanbul to Palestine.
Izraelyje aš susipažinau su dar vienu žmogum, kuris tada padėjo Sugiharai. Ir tai buvo Zerach Verhaftik. Ir jisai tada buvo religijų ministras.
He didn't think about himself, but about the 15,000 Jewish refugees from Poland who came to Lithuania. Many people didn't see how important it is to leave Lithuania, because after all, Lithuania was a neutral state. The Soviet Union annexed Lithuania only in late July. Then my father had the hard task to persuade the Jews to come to the consulate and ask for these visas. Okay. At the beginning, the Jews said, oh, these papers are not worth anything. But my father worked hard, went to the city of Keidan, where the Mir Yeshiva was, and most of the yeshivas did not want to obtain these papers. But the head of the yeshiva did want. My father saw it his mission to stay as much as possible, because he knew that there's no other one who can do the same work and save the Jews. Eventually, the security department of the NKVD heard that there is some Jew who isn't lying low like most of the Jews and handling his own personal life, but he's doing much tumult. He goes here, there, speaks with consuls and with officials. So one day they decided to summon my father to an interrogation. My parents came to Kaunas at late 1939, and only in late September, October 1940, decided to leave.
After organizing the Jewish refugees and helping them obtain the visas for life, Mr. Zora Warhoftig, with his family, escaped Holocaust through Japan, Canada, and USA before reaching Palestine in 1947. In 1961, he was elected as Minister of Religions in Israel.
The clouds of war became very ominous, and some Jews started looking for ways how to go away. And there were two Dutch yeshiva pupils from Holland who studied in Yeshivat Tels, which is a famous Lithuanian yeshiva, and they went to Mr. Zwarkendijk, who was the Dutch consul or honorable consul in Kaunas. My father asked them to ask the consul if he agrees to put into their passports something which looks like a visa, because this will make the passport look as if it has a visa to Curacao. And he agreed.
The Dutch consulate was full of people, and no one had time for him. And he had 7 documents like this which needed to be stamped and so on. So the consul gave him a little corner somewhere near a table, gave him a sample visa, said copy it 7 times. So the visas are handwritten in French by my brother-in-law, who didn't know a word of French. But he copied whatever he saw written there.
In July 1940, Jan Zwartendijk issued 2,345 visas to Curacao that served the refugees as visas to their final destination. However, none of the refugees actually reached that island.
Many years later, my father met the man who was governor of Curacao in 1940. He became the Dutch ambassador to Israel in 1969. My father seized the opportunity and asked him, told him about the story and asked him, had Jews really reached Curacao, would you have let them enter? So he said, no, I would not have let them. If they would not have been let into it, their fate would be like the St. Louis ship, which had 937 Jews in late 1939, and no country agreed to receive them, and they went back to Europe, and 2/3 of them died by the Nazis. So my father said, let's look at the atlas, and there's no possibility to leave Lithuania through the north, through Sweden, and to the west the Nazis were, and to the south there was no way to reach Turkey. So the only way was through the east. And then my father said maybe we would try to speak with the Japanese consul, Mr. Sugihara.
Aistra, noras ir viena iš svajonių šalių buvo Rusija, rusų kultūra, ta geroji, klasikinė rusų kultūra. Ir jisai norėjo dirbti Japonijos diplomatinį darbą, atstovauti Japonijoje būtent Maskvoje.
千畝さんが、外務省で非常に、ロシア語が堪能で、随分外交的な力を発揮されていた頃で、私の父は千畝さんに大変憧れて、自分もおじさんのようになりたいと、中国人向けの参考書のようなものだと思いますが、この中には千畝さんの書き込みが各ページほとんど入っていまして、これで千畝さんはロシア語を随分勉強したのではないかと思います。
It's very interesting that Sugihara was appointed to his position in Kaunas only in late 1939. This was the first time that Japan appointed a diplomat in Lithuania, in Kaunas. The Japanese did it because they had an agreement with Nazi Germany, and they wanted to look after the Nazis and see what they are doing. My father writes in his book that Sugihara was a very liberal man. Wherever he could do a good thing, he didn't miss the opportunity. My father recruited 3 yeshiva pupils named Ederman, Portnoy, and Zupnik. They actually lived in the consulate of Sugihara. I don't think they slept there, but they spent their whole days, almost 20 hours, 24 hours a day, for a few weeks, from the 23rd of July till the end of August, because the Russians annexed or took hold of Lithuania and ordered all the consulates, all the foreign consulates, to be closed at the end of August.
When we got there, the street was full of people. One couldn't get in. My brother decided to standing the queue there and so on. It's a question of days. And there was also a rumor that Sugihara was leaving in a few days' time, which turned out to be correct. There was a metal fence, not a very high one, and a gate. And in front of that gate was a mass of people. And they were letting them in 2 at a time, 3 at a time. Vilek noticed on the other end, on the right-hand side, a little gate. And no one there. So he walked down to that gate, saw that the gate was open. So he walked down the path, knocked on the door, and opened it. That was the kitchen of the Sugihara house. And there was a lady there, a Japanese lady. So he bowed towards her, she bowed towards him, and after a few bows, he saw a door on the other side of the kitchen. He pointed at the door and she said, okay. When he opened the next door, he found himself face to face with Sugihara. Sugihara asked him, how did you get in? So he told him. So he laughed. He said, what can I do for you? He says, look, I need 7 visas. He says, okay, give them to me. And that's how he got the 7 visas.
There's another question, did he do it with the help of the Japanese government or against their will? But many people say that he did it against their will. And this makes his part in the whole story even more outstanding. He could have been exiled by the Japanese government and so on, but he took the risk.
Without the official permission from his government, during July and August of 1940, Mr. Sugihara issued more than 2,000 transit visas to Japan, thus helping the refugees to escape from the Soviet Union and saving thousands of lives. These visas are known as visas for life.
My mother's name is Nechama Nuta Ram, and she was born in the southern Ukraine, but she grew up in Vilna. And Yanya was my mother's first husband, and they escaped together from Poland with the Sugihara visa. When they arrived in Kaunas, Sugihara had already left. Now, because they were members of the Bund movement, their friends in the Bund movement had been able to get duplicate visas, and they were saving these visas for other members of the Bund who were coming after Sugihara had left so that they could give them these visas to help them escape.
As a matter of fact, speaking of Vilek, the time with Vilek was a happy time, full stop. There was a war, but that was around us. Immediately, our close family were at peace. We had no problems. Everything found a solution. Whether it was food at times when you couldn't get food, or whether it was documents or papers or trying to collect enough money to pay for 7 people on the Trans-Siberian Railway and so on. Everything went smoothly, and I was not involved in any of that. We stayed in Moscow for about a week. A beautiful city. We saw the underground at that time, which was one of the fantastic things in the world, and it was worth praise. It was really very interesting. Beautiful city. Finally, we got on the Trans-Siberian Railway and went off. We got to Vladivostok. The control, everything, every suitcase had to be tipped upside down and emptied. And they were extremely thorough. My sister had a few rings. She was asked to take them off. When she took them off and put them on the table, the guy just did like this into a drawer. She said, "Look, you can have those rings, but there is one ring amongst them. It doesn't cost much money. It's one of the cheapest. I got that from my mother when I was a little girl. Give me that back." Niet. That was the attitude.
And in Vladivostok, I got a very hard bronchitis. It was Yom Kippur, I think. Rafael Ben Natan was a young boy then, and at that time he was 18 years old, strong, capable. He went out to the temperature was -30 and found a doctor, a lady doctor, and she came and gave instructions and also prescriptions. And then he went out again to look for a pharmacy. It can fairly be said that this man saved my life.
1941年になるとですね、前の年からどんどんユダヤ難民が日本に押し寄せていきましてですね、だんだん日本に滞留するユダヤ人が増えてきたわけですね。で、日本政府としてはその状況に今困難をきたしてですね、2月19日に当時の松岡洋介外務大臣から、総領事にですね、こういうふうな電報を打ってるんですね。神戸のユダヤ教会に問い合わせたところ、多数の避難民の世話まで引き受けられないということなので、今後はビザの発給を控えるようにと、そういう指示が出されたんですね。それから、前の年、つまり、1940年12月20日以前のビザに対してはですね、厳しく再検閲を行いと。総領事はですね、本省に対して強く反論しているわけなんです。で、特にネイサブローのですね、その日本政府に対する反論の電報が残ってるんですけれども、 で、どういったことかって言いますと、ひとたび日本の領事館が出したビザ、これはつまりカウナスの杉原領事が出したビザのことを指しているんですけれども、ひとたび日本の在外公館が出したものに対してですね、別の公館がこれは無効だというようなことは言えないと。そんなことをすると日本の威信に関わるということをきつく反論してるんですね。
Despite the restrictions by the ministry, the acting consul general Mr. Nei Saburo decided to permit the refugees to enter Japan and even issued visas for those who did not have them. The refugees then took a Makusamaru ship, managed by JTB, to reach Suruga, Japan.
The journey was quite rough. It was early spring. As a matter of fact, the sea was still frozen around the harbor, and we had to wait for an icebreaker to come in and free this wreck of an old ship that we were on. And the icebreaker that went out to sea, making a passageway, we followed it. Shortly after that, we were hit by a storm, which continued from the very beginning almost to the very end of the journey. The ship was creaking and groaning, ready to fall apart, leaning to the starboard and the port side, making up its mind in which direction it wanted to capsize and sink. It was a very, very bad journey.
When we got off the boat, I remembered that my father carried me in his arms, and there was a lineup of Japanese people who felt my hair because they had never seen, my father explained to me, they had never seen anybody with hair like mine. And I looked around and everybody else had black hair. So I realized that they needed to try it, to touch it, and you know, they were very, So I wasn't afraid, yeah.
Finally, sunshine appeared just as we reached, as we got in sight of the Japanese islands. And so that we arrived to Tsuruga in a very good mood. We were happy in a country which welcomed us, which gave us a chance to visit at least. We didn't have an idea how long we were going to stay there, or how long they'll let us stay there. And it was a different world to the one we came from. And then there was all those little things along the way. The train journey from Tsuruga to Kobe, the beautiful landscape of Japan, particularly springtime. Vladivostok was still full of ice and cold, but Tsuruga was already in sunshine with trees and shrubs and flowers flowering. What made a tremendous impression on us was the train, for example. Spotlessly clean. The driver, locomotive driver, with a steam locomotive, wore white gloves. Something you don't see in Europe. I've never seen it in Europe, never seen it anywhere else except Japan. And that made an impression. It's those little things, the tidiness in the country. Everything is clean, everything is organized. You had the impression from the moment you landed in Tsuruga onwards. Now we arrived to Kobe, and when we arrived, a family of 7 we were, got one room in that house. So you had to take turns in the bathroom, you had to take turns in the kitchenette. But we were extraordinarily happy. That was a very happy part of our life because we were out of Europe.
タデウシュ・ロメルっていうポーランド大使。彼が最後までどこにも行けなかったユダヤ難民のためにですね、最終的な行き先国のビザを取得するために大変な努力をしてるんですね。それが何百名の分がそのタデウシュ・ロメルのおかげで入手できたということ。
Ambassador Tadeusz Romer worked in order to provide refugees with funds necessary for everyday life. Thanks to his negotiations with the diplomats of the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, and other countries in Japan, he could guarantee the Polish refugees the right to reach their new homelands.
First, we were supposed to be on an Australian visa. And then there was some other family that managed to get it. I don't know what. But the consul said, I have visas for you for New Zealand. Felix said, that's better, further south. So this is how we got the visas. The whole time we were in Japan, of course, we were in contact with occupied Poland. Japan was a neutral country. And we were in contact and received letters. The moment we left Japan, we were out of touch. We received once or twice those Red Cross, letters, which took 2 years and said nothing. Not that the other letters said much, but in between you could still understand a few things.
Mr. Sugihara didn't have a very pleasant life after the war. The foreign ministry of Japan did not embrace him so much, and he had difficulties.
昭和24年か5年ぐらいの話ですが、長男のひろきくんを連れておばのとこへ遊びに来て、その当時の食事のそれほどのごちそうもない時代で、そんなと町から来た人に何を食べさせようっておばは言って、そしたら千畝さんは玉ねぎが好きやから玉ねぎの生に塩でもかけて食べさせたってくれっていう話で、で実際にそんなことを食べるかなと思ったら結構喜んで食べて、田舎のこっちの方の田舎で玉ねぎの生食べる人はその当時なかったもんですから、
ビシッとして見えた感じでしたよね。
いかにも紳士って感じやったね。子供心に私は思ったもん。うわ、紳士ってこういう人かなって思いましたね。
当時はね、みんな本当の着物のようなね、昔臭い着物をみんな着てた時代に、あの方だけピシッとね背広で着て見えたんで、紳士的な感じでしたよね。たまたま私が行った時に千畝さんと一番下の信樹君がいて、でお土産にマシュマロをねいただいたので、そんな見たこともないお菓子をで覚えてるんです。5歳ぐらいだけど、千畝さんは信樹君のことをブキブキって言ってすごい可愛がって見えて、で私は3歳で父親が亡くしたので、父親のいいなっていう味がねわからないけど、信樹君がパパパパって甘えていたし、千畝さんも可愛がって見えたんで、父親ってそんなにいいものかなっていうふうに思ったけど。
Mes praėjom pro metropolį, pro viešbutį. Ir mano tėvas sako, tu žinai, kas tame viešbutyje buvo? Sakau, kas tėveliai? Sako, čia buvo labai ypatingas žmogus, kuris pasiaukojo, kad išgelbėti 1000 žydų.
My father sees the opportunity of meeting Sempo or Chiune Sugihara himself, and they had a very cordial meeting, and my father complimented him very much on saving the Jews back about almost 30 years before that. Eventually, after many years of struggle by the survivors, he got this, the proclamation of righteous among the nations only in 1985, a year before he passed away. But at least he got it in his life. It gave him some kind of consolation and late recognition by Yad Vashem of historical deeds.
Ir jisai vienam vieninteliam interviu Izraelyje, kurį jisai pasisakė, kai jo paklausė, tai jisai sako, aš nieko ypatingo nepadariau, aš padariau, kas buvo būtina.
He was an extraordinary and righteous man, but he did, being modest, he didn't publicize his big and important work like many politicians today do. He deserved much more than he was given, and I think that he's a symbol of righteousness in the whole world.
大したことをしたわけではない。当然のことをしただけです。
We have 11 grandchildren, all of whom are wonderful. You know, we're very proud of our family, and none of this would have happened if it hadn't been for Chiune Sugihara. I can't believe it. You know, I keep telling people when I'm with them, I say, you know, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for Chiune Sugihara.
Sugihara saved my mother's life. There's no question of that. 90% of all the Jews in Poland perished. She would have joined her family and been murdered in the mass executions of Ponar. Sugihara saved my mother, and so in doing so, he gave me my life.
Sugihara has been very meaningful for our family, and he's really changed. He saved thousands of Jews, and if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be here today. And my family is in great debt to him, of course, and I think that his name denotes somebody who saved so many people, but as well as the connotations of his name are that he really is a hero.
It can be right to disobey authority, and it can be wrong to obey authority under certain circumstances. But it takes a very developed human being and mind to be able to understand the differences.
Sugihara did a great thing, and because the Jews grabbed every opportunity they had in the middle of the war to save themselves. And had there been more people like Mr. Sugihara, there could have been many more Jewish survivors.
Aš manau, kad mokyklose turi būti vadovėliuose tas pasakojimas apie Sugiharą.
Now, what I can say about the man, I think, which is very true, no doubt, and which is not just trying to satisfy a book or people or a film. He did what he did because he was essentially a good man. I think that was the whole story.